In this video, we'll be looking at how to ask for and give opinions, as well as exploring different ways of agreeing and disagreeing with people. In this scene, we're looking at a casual conversation between two friends. That means that most of these phrases used are informal, so you should keep that in mind when using them. The first phrase, how about, is a shortened form of questions like what do you think about and how do you feel about. These are the general ways to ask for someone's opinion about something and are acceptable in most situations. The phrase is followed by either a noun or a gerund and is used both informally and formally. The next phrase, personally I think, is fairly informal. Its meaning is basically the same as I think, but emphasizes that what you're saying is just your own opinion and not a fact. It's very common in English to begin with a short expression of agreement before giving a different opinion. You can see this in our scene with the phrase, yeah I suppose, which is followed up with a criticism of the movie. I suppose is a casual and half-hearted agreement that suggests that the speaker is only agreeing reluctantly. The next phrase, don't you think, is an indirect way for the speaker to state an opinion while also seeking confirmation that the listener thinks the same way. English speakers also tend to agree with someone by adding to the original opinion. In our scene, we have this phrase, for sure. This is a very casual agreement, which is then followed by support for the original comment. Finally, we have a very common word in the UK. I reckon is a casual way of saying I think, and British people tend to use reckon just as much as think. If you watch any British movies or TV programs, then you'll definitely hear this at some point. Okay, let's move on to the next scene and check out some more phrases. The phrase, this is a strange question but, will obviously precede a surprising or unusual question. It's usually used as a kind of admittance by the speaker that they know they're asking something unusual. It also serves as a kind of warning to the listener to expect an unusual question. What's your honest opinion about means that the speaker is looking for an open and frank discussion about something. However, when asking, you should still be careful of how honest you are. So try not to be too direct or unkind when replying. The phrase, since you asked, simply means because you asked. Here the speaker is only saying their opinion because they were asked for it, and normally wouldn't have said anything at all. In this conversation, that's crazy is a very informal and somewhat rude way to disagree with something. It essentially means that you disagree with them, but it can also imply that you think they're crazy for saying that. So be careful when and how you use it. What makes you say that is a more natural way of saying, why did you say that? In other words, the speaker wants to know the reasons for someone's opinion. I see what you mean simply means the speaker acknowledges and understands the opinion or point of view they've just heard. However, it doesn't always mean that they fully agree with the opinion. So this phrase is sometimes followed by a polite disagreement. Our last phrase in this scene is "if you ask me," and it's used before giving your opinion. It's quite polite and clearly shows that the statement is just an opinion and not fact. All of these phrases have been quite informal, so let's look at some more formal ones in our last scene coming up next. This conversation is a little more polite than the others we've seen so far. The first phrase, "what are your views on?" simply means "what do you think about?" It's quite formal and could be used in a business meeting. Another similar phrase is "where do you stand on?" You may hear these questions used on news programs or in interviews. In my opinion, it's simply a polite way to state what you think. It's very often written on the internet as the abbreviation IMO. "I'm afraid I can't agree with you" is a very polite but direct way to state your disagreement. "The way I see things is another polite way to say what you think. It also emphasizes that it is just your point of view. An indirect way to ask for an opinion is to say, "Are you aware of?" Here, we're asking the listener if they know about some fact or situation. The listener is then expected to react by giving their opinion. "I can see where you're coming from" is another phrase that can be used to acknowledge someone's viewpoint before we offer a counter-argument. Sometimes we hear a new opinion that we may actually agree with. We can express this by saying, "I must admit that I never thought about that." It doesn't mean that you've conceded to their argument, but just that it's given you another viewpoint to consider. Next, we have "I agree to some extent, but," which is another phrase that's used to partially agree before giving more counter-arguments. Finally, our last phrase, "let's agree to disagree," is a fairly friendly and polite way to end the discussion because neither person will change their mind. That's all for this video lesson. I hope you found something useful. Try using some of these phrases in your next discussion to add some variety, but remember to be careful when using some of the more informal ones. Thanks for watching.